All right. Uh, Welcome to Nation Betrayed. Another special episode kicking off Crime Victims' Rights Week. We had a great start yesterday. We read the names and did a tribute to victims who had submitted their picture and their loved one's picture and name. They were victims of medical crimes. We are also going to do a closing ceremony on Sunday, so you still have time to put your victim in through the memorial wall on betrayalprojectusa.org, betrayalprojectusa.org. You still have time to add. I hopefully will have double the names that we read, because I'm willing to spend all afternoon reading them. If you submit your loved one's name, we will read it. And so we're gonna do that again on this coming Sunday. So please get your loved one's name in by Saturday. And But every day this week we have an episode at this time on these same channels. Mick Rosato's Intentional with Mick Facebook we're streaming to, Intentional with Mick Rumble, and Betrayal Project USA X. And we are doing a topic every day. And today's topic is with Leslie Batts and Mick Rosato. And we're going to be talking largely about if you're a victim of medical crime, knowing your rights, knowing what you can do, and taking action, including reporting crimes. We want to encourage the reporting of medical crimes this week, because it's National Crime Week. So with that, I'm going to just kind of preface what we're doing is, so like often we hear, me and Teresa do a lot of interviews, and so we hear people are told constantly what happened to them, what happened to their loved one is not a crime. Actually, they're told it didn't happen, but then they're told it's not a crime. It's somehow malpractice, which is really not true. There are a lot of laws that apply and protect your rights to not have your loved one murdered. But tonight, we're going to walk through things that can be reported, maybe even some things that you didn't think about were crimes in your own story, and how you will report them. And just to clarify again, and we clarify this, we've said this a lot, and you'll hear this all week. We're not saying that every case is going to be prosecuted, or even maybe deserves to be prosecuted. Each case is going to be individual, but onesies and twosies, they're always going to kick back and say, well, we need the perfect case, or this isn't my area, right? And so we're not saying that, but many cases reported together, like in 1 week, our goal is 10,000. I know that's pushing it, but a lot of we're in groups on Facebook where everybody's wanting justice, and there's 19,000 in one group and 7,000 in another group and 10,000 in another group, all different types of medical crime. So we figured 10,000, if everybody would do it in those groups, we could easily get there. And so basically, many cases being reported will prove a pattern. And when that pattern is proven, it becomes investigatable. They almost have to investigate it. And if they don't, we'll make a federal case out of it. So reporting those patterns is how we become visible, how this issue becomes visible. And that's what we believe will trigger investigations. It's worked for others. And like we say, justice is going to begin with recognition. So, what do we mean before we get into the nitty gritty presentation? What do we mean by a medical crime? I mean, it's kind of simple if you put it in plain language. Um, a medical crime can be harm that's caused by action or even inaction. So, not acting when they should have, and it can include negligence and coercion, deception, abuse of authority. So when you look at those examples, um, no informed consent, forced coerced treatment, you're going to hear some of these things talked about. Denial of care or discrimination, isolation from family, falsified records, DNR changes without consent. These are things that would, outside of a hospital, if they happened, they would definitely deserve some scrutiny. Before COVID, they would have definitely deserved some scrutiny. Sorry, Facebook, I said the word COVID. Oops. Forget that we're on Facebook. So we're going to also talk about you're going to hear talk about the different authorities. So like we want you to know who's who in the government zoo, if you will. So like what your if you report a crime to the president, he's not able to do anything. If you report a crime to your sheriff, his job, literally his job, why he's elected, is literally to take those complaints and protect your rights. We had Sheriff Mack on a few weeks ago, and he was very clear that sheriffs should have been protecting patient rights. They should be protecting parents against CPS overreach and all that stuff. So, like, know the difference between what your sheriff does and what your state senator does. Right? It's two different things. It's like the dog catcher and the mayor. They have different roles, and so we're going to talk about that. I think you're going to hear Leslie talk about the attorney generals and where you can go with some of that stuff. Legislators. Mick is going to talk more about the agencies and what sends a shiver down the hospital's timber, if you will. Right? Like, what would they normally be afraid of? What triggers audits? And that type of thing. So we're going to be talking about that. And the key thing to know is, we always want to go to the highest level, but sometimes the highest level doesn't have the power to do what we need them to do. And we need them all to do their jobs. Don't get me wrong. We need legislators to legislate responsibly. And we need those that are charged with enforcing that legislation to enforce it. Because, like you heard Leslie say before, if you have a bill and it doesn't have any teeth, well, what use is it, right? So if you've joined our spaces, you've heard her say that just this weekend. And then you have the different agencies you're going to hear about, like the DOJ, the HHS, the OIG. A lot of people don't know about the OIG, but you're going to hear Leslie talk about that, and CMS. So different agencies handle different parts of the same story. And so you may be reporting multiple different things to different areas, and you're going to hear that. I want to jump into a discussion, though, about the PrEP Act, or as I call it, the PERP Act. Leslie, you know a lot about the PERP Act and what it is and what it isn't. So let's talk about that first.
I have to unmute myself. Sorry. So the PrEP Act was designed in 2005, passed by legislation in 2005 in an omnibus bill. Um, I know omnibus has become quite a um, common term over the years because that's how legislators like to legislate now. Instead of doing single item bills, they kind of throw everything into the stew pot and pass it all at once. The PrEP Act was simply a bill number that was entered into the omnibus that was passed back in 2005 by the federal government. You have to go about 3 levels deep to actually find what was written as the PrEP Act. And it was designed to protect manufacturers, doctors, hospitals, anyone involved in countermeasures for a public health emergency. Now, the intent is wonderful. The intent is we don't want to limit innovation. We don't want to limit people being willing to take opportunities to try new things. And in theory, that's great. In practice, what it did was it provided a blanket layer of protection for anything goes. Then you throw in other things like the CARES money and the COVID relief funds, and you literally had the perfect storm for as much damage as could possibly be created. So when you talk about the PrEP Act, one of the things you have to understand is that the PrEP Act was instituted and granted blanket level immunity to anyone who had any involvement in a countermeasure for COVID. It goes all the way up to and including a truck driver transporting vaccines. If that truck driver transporting vaccines had an accident, even if he fell asleep behind the wheel and caused multiple deaths, he was granted immunity. So it's, like I said, in my heart, I want to believe that people have good intentions, that the intent is appropriate and done with the betterment of mankind in mind. But what happens in practice and in reality usually ends up something very, very different.
Right. And that's where me and you are like, you have such a good heart. And I'm like, the government sucks at everything. And I like to think that they had bad intentions, but it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? Like some good, some bad. But the PrEP Act, so does it really give them immunity? What strips
Yes.
their immunity? What would strip their immunity from that?
The only exception to the PrEP Act is one clause called willful misconduct. Now, in order to establish willful misconduct, there is a checklist of criteria that has to be done. And that willful misconduct includes, if a doctor had walked into a hospital room with a gun and put a bullet in someone, that would be considered and construed as willful misconduct.
Right.
Everything else basically can be explained away through, well, we didn't know any better, or, and even if you can prove willful misconduct, you still don't have the opportunity for accountability because now you have to go into the federal system through a special court similar to the vaccine courts, where it's separate and an entity all on its own. Instead of being able to have a jury of your peers, you're facing bureaucrats and
But
a
that's for
panel.
civil, right? So that's for civil. For
That's all civil. That is all
right.
civil.
But for criminal, that's a little bit different.
For criminal, they didn't expect anyone to pursue this as a criminal element
Hmm.
or as a criminal offense, because back in the 70s is really when the shift happened from treating doctors like everyone else too. Oh, they're infallible, they make mistakes, but every once in a while, they
Mhm.
might be negligent. So we're not going to hold them criminally responsible. We're going to kind of give everything this broad negligence term. And negligence, the difference between negligence and criminal is intent. For criminal, if you can prove that the intent was to cause harm, or the intent was to not be helpful, then you're switching gears from civil negligence to criminal
I know.
intent.
And
So,
there, go ahead.
good.
And there are criminal elements to a lot of medical. There's some criminal elements to medical crime. I know particularly how your husband was killed and Teresa's father, and how I was almost killed. There's there were criminal elements to it, and I do want us to talk about some of those since we are going to encourage people um, to report a crime. It's crime week. Civil is one thing. Maybe someday somebody will be able to sue civilly, but crime is crime. Laws are laws. And if it was a crime 5 years ago, it's a crime today, basically. So, um, so let's go through your presentation, and then we'll talk about some of the. We'll talk a little bit more about fraud, but when we do get to fraud, I just want everybody to know we are going to deep dive into fraud tomorrow with Dr. Margaret Aranda on. We're going to medical fraud in specifically. So let's start with your presentation. I'm going to have you go through it.
Okay. So this first slide, this is under the assumption that this is something that's happening right now. What do you do if you are in a situation where you believe that someone is being treated inappropriately that could be construed as criminal? We have to remember it is not your job to investigate a crime. It is your job to report the crime and allow the authorities to investigate it. What you can do is you can help them along the way. One of the things that you do is you notify them immediately in the process of the crime happening, if possible. If not, the very first thing you should do is call the police and say, I've witnessed this, what I believe is a crime, and get the information to them as quickly as possible. The second thing you need to do is make sure that you write all of the records into one location. You need to request them. Do not stop requesting them until you are confident that you have everything. I will tell you, we all know that it takes multiple requests. It
Now, what
takes
about people? What about people who don't? They are not the person who's allowed to. They can't get the records because they're not allowed. I tend to tell them they should still report the crime because they can be subpoenaed. It is the pattern gets proven, and then they have to investigate it, and it is their job to subpoena those records from the custodian of records or whatever. But they can write an eyewitness report, right? Like if you saw somebody being abused. So don't let the medical. It's like if possible, right?
right. Well, and that's where we kind of go off into the weeds, because from personal experience, when you contact the police department or the sheriff's department or any of these other agencies and you tell them, I'm a witness to a medical crime, they say, well, that's a civil matter.
Yeah.
So you have, for your due diligence, regardless of whether or not they take you seriously, regardless of whether or not they actually investigate it, it still needs to be reported.
Right.
If you have the ability to get the medical records, get everything. And they may tell you, well, there's really nothing more that you would be interested in. It doesn't matter whether or not it's something they think you're interested in. You want every single page, and you have to specify that you want every single page.
Hmm.
I'm sure Betrayal Project has a breakdown of specifically what to ask for, such as medication administration records, flow sheets, and audit trails and those kind of
Yep.
things. But you make sure you get everything you can. The third thing, you want to document. Absolutely document everything that you saw to a T, with timestamps, dates, who was there, who was the one performing the treatment, what you said when the treatment was being performed, so on and so forth.
If you
If
know.
if you know, next you're going to identify again who was it that was involved. Even if the doctor wasn't in the room, he may have been the one to make the order.
Yeah.
So even if you didn't see the doctor there, you can find out. Ask them who ordered this medication, who ordered this treatment, who ordered this procedure, and document it as well as possible. You make sure you have not just one copy, and don't just put it in a file folder somewhere. Put it on a disk, put it on a flash drive, put it somewhere that you can have multiple copies, that if anything happens to one, you have backups. And then again, if it's possible, if you realize at the time that the crime is being committed, or as soon as you are aware that a crime may have been committed, report it. Report it to every applicable agency. That means your state medical boards. That means if it's something as serious as, we have evidence of in some cases of kidnapping, people who are
Hmm.
restrained physically and chemically and are not allowed to leave the hospital. Under the federal definition, that is kidnapping.
Right.
Um, and those things would go to the FBI. Violent crimes go to the FBI. There are some other agencies that get involved with patients' rights and that kind of things. But there are still federal regulations. There's still federal laws that are being broken.
Yeah, right. And so like you said, we've seen people. I'm just going to show this for a minute. We've seen people, for example. So this is the website for the DOJ, right? Report a crime or submit a complaint. And you have violent crimes, which is the FBI. That's like your battery, medical battery, that type of thing. But you have civil rights violations. Um, you have fraud and even COVID-19 fraud, which and antitrust crimes that kind of can play in. So when you talked about people being held in a hospital, like we have seen medical records where somebody wanted to leave and they shot him up with Ativan and restrained him, gave them the protocol, and they died. To me, that would be a violent crime.
Mhm.
Um,
It qualifies as kidnapping in many
yeah.
states because you're being held against your will. You're
Hmm.
not being allowed to exercise your right to leave, and you are in a incapacitated position. You are being held by someone who is stronger, more authoritative than you, and you don't even really have to be physically threatened to be held against your will.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, they don't actually have to physically touch you to hold you against your will. You just have to be in fear of harm if you attempted to leave
Right.
for a crime.
Okay. And then things like unnecessarily overdosing a patient or overdosing, like in the hospice, in the murdered by hospice cases, a lot of times they've they keep the family in the dark, and they over drug somebody to take away their ability to really fight back or coherently tell their family something's going on. We saw that in the hospitals too, but um, Where would that fall? Where would, in your opinion? I mean, and I know, I understand, like it could fall many places, but would
Specifically, the first thing that comes to mind is the patient rights under the Code of Federal Regulation. Uh, and again, this is where things get a little convoluted because the way the system is set up, every hospital that is going to bill for Medicare or Medicaid has to meet the criteria for conditions of participation under CMS, or Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Whether the patient is a Medicare or Medicaid patient or not, they still have to follow the same guidelines. So something like that would definitely be reported if it's at your local level. Whoever has the law enforcement jurisdiction of your area should be the very first person that is called. In every one of these cases, if they will give you a case number, make a note of it, get the business card of the detective or whoever you spoke with, make sure you have that case number. From that point, you would contact, I would imagine, if it's a hospice, that there is a hospice agency specifically that oversees the guidelines and regulations for hospice. That would definitely be somebody that you would want to report. I'm not terribly familiar with hospice. It's not something I've dealt with, but I imagine they do have a authority organization that oversees what they do and their requirements. CMS would definitely get a report. Your state health department, every agency, even if you don't think that they are connected necessarily directly, I would file a complaint with them. Worst case scenario, they're going to tell you that's not something we handle, and you ask them, then who does? And you get the information for that next step or the next agency that you want to reach out to.
all right. And we'll get this one pager out there in the chat and stuff. Hopefully Teresa can put it out there. All right, let's go back to your presentation. So covering us up, because I'm gonna make this bigger because there's a lot here. So
Right.
walk us through our federal protections and our rights.
Well, unfortunately, they're very limited.
Mm-hmm.
At the federal level, they, separation of the federal and the state laws, and most of this stuff falls under state. But at the federal level, again, you have the Code of Federal Regulations, and under those codes, Section 482.13 is the patient's rights. Specifically, certain sections, you have the right to say no to any treatment. Now, again, this is a federal law. So if you said no and they did it anyway, this is going to be what was violated. This is the law that was violated. You have a right to informed decision making. Again, under the same thing, not only do you have the right to say no to that treatment, but the doctor must explain, under informed consent, the doctor must explain risks and options before treatment. This is a federal law. Right to be free from abuse. Again, under the Code of Federal Regulations, you must be treated safely and with respect. Well, we know that was done almost never during COVID. Of course, the Right to Privacy Act, if you have the right to have your medical information and you have the right for that medical information to be kept private. This is where if you are not getting the medical records you are requesting, you can file a complaint with HIPAA about about that particular hospital or agency not providing your medical records. And then you also have, I know one of the things that we've always talked about in this movement is that vaccinated patients received different treatment than unvaccinated patients. And where that is not a protected group now, I think if enough complaints were filed,
Yeah, exactly.
it might become one.
Mm-hmm.
Because we now have, not just COVID vaccine, we also have the childhood vaccines that people are starting to understand may not be may not be right for their child as the schedule has been laid out. And maybe they want to do a delayed schedule, or maybe they want to do some of the vaccines, but maybe not all of the vaccines. So I think if we push hard enough, we have the ability to make non-vaccinated a protected group as well. But that's
I,
gonna that's kind of down the road and going to take some work.
I think I know. I think you're right. I think if enough people who feel that their loved ones were treated differently for because of their vax status, I think if enough people report it as discrimination, then you'll start to see, oh wow, this is a big pattern of, you know, of things that have happened, and we should probably go ahead and handle that. So the other thing I was gonna mention too, the you don't have to. So like I hear this a lot, so this is why I'm bringing it up. Where people say, "Well, I don't know if they got informed consent, and so I wouldn't report it because I don't have proof that they didn't get informed consent, or that they were, I don't have proof, right? It's not your
Mm-hmm.
job to prove it." And quite honestly, with the state of medical records, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So if they
Exactly.
don't have something documented that proves they gave, it's their job to prove that they gave informed consent, get something signed or something, whatever. um it's their job. So
Yeah.
it's not your job to prove it, it's their job to prove that they did it. They're the ones required to give the informed consent. And so
And that's
so
actually written into that right to informed decision making.
mhm,
One of the line items in there is that there must be a signed consent form. So if
right.
they don't have a document that is signed by the patient or patient representative authorizing treatment for that procedure, then that's a violation.
So I can almost guarantee that almost everyone listening has that one,
Yep.
because they did not do I don't know what happened to informed consent. Informed consent hasn't, it disappeared and it hasn't been seen for many years. Um, it's I don't even know if a lot of doctors and nurses know how to spell informed consent anymore. That's how little they do it. And they, if they have a informed consent form, it's probably has dust all over it. They would have to like blow it up. Like there's very few that do it. So
Honestly, I think a lot of that went by the wayside when they started the electronic signatures
sure. Yep.
because nobody had to look at the forms anymore. They just handed you a signature pad.
Yeah.
So nobody read them anymore. So they assumed, and you get that implied consent. Well, you signed and you gave consent, but I didn't know what I was giving consent for
Right.
because I never saw a document that told me what I was giving consent for.
And each
So the implication is I've consented to everything.
Yep, exactly. And this is where you're going to hear this a lot this week too. This is where you need to go to I do not consent form.com, I do not consent form.com, and have that filled out. And we're going to do a deep dive into that tomorrow night too. So you're going to get all your questions about that form and how to use it answered by Laura Bartlett herself. And if it comes out of her mouth, you best believe it. So, but I do not consentform.com. Make sure you get the right one and have it ready before you need it. So this is your federal rights. We're going to put a lot of this stuff on our Facebook and get it out there, some downloadables on our website too for you. So, but these are very good. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. So let me go to the next slide because you're probably going to cover it. So this is your evidence checklist, medical records and consent forms if you got them. Billing statements, that's a good one because when we deep dive into fraud, I can tell you this is very important. A lot of people got their billing statements and were a little surprised at what was on it. I was one of those people. I was like, when did this happen? But but it's everybody. I literally maybe met 5 or 6 doctors in my entire stay that where they tried to kill me. I met 5 or 6 doctors. There were over 30 doctors that billed my insurance, and some of them weren't real. So
Well,
get the billing
absolutely.
statement.
And I will tell you, it not only that, but when you have, we've talked about consent forms, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
lot of cases in COVID, when there was an admission to the hospital, you're supposed to sign and give authorization for billing and treatment, right? That's your
Mm-hmm.
general blanket consent. Many people never signed those documents. And in my particular case, I can tell you that document was never signed by either myself or my husband.
That's
It
right.
was signed as, telephone authorization or per so and so. And when they sent me a bill for treatment for my husband, I refused to pay it. Not only because they killed my husband, but when I asked them, show me any contract, anything with my signature or my husband's signature agreeing
And do
to be
it.
responsible for payment. And they couldn't do it. They could not provide a single document that had his signature for treatment or consent or my signature for treatment or consent.
That's right.
The next thing I got was a letter from the hospital saying that the bill had been eliminated. They literally erased all of the charges because they couldn't prove that we had given them authorization for treatment. As far as the law was concerned, they didn't have the authority to give him an aspirin, let alone
That's right.
intubate him and sedate him and paralyze him.
That's right. And we see that in almost all medical records too, where even in my own medical records, the first page of my medical records was patient unable to sign, and I was fully aware and fully able to sign. They never asked me to sign anything, not even an admission to the hospital. They never asked my husband to sign anything. If for some reason I was incapacitated, which I was never incapacitated, I was never asked to sign anything, yet some hospital employee signed their name in the place of mine. And that is the first page of my medical records, and that's fraud.
Yes.
I fired my doctor every day I was there. He continued to write orders and bill, and that's how I wrote them and said, I'm not paying this $16,000 that wasn't paid because I fired him the first day. He had no right to come back. So there's all these little things that are fraud, but we see that signature one in just about every. Um I can't think of a medical record that we looked at where it wasn't that way. Period. So photos and injuries is really important because when you think about Peggy Hokett's husband and when she got those medical records and how horrific those photos, I can never forget how horrific those photos are of her husband and what he looked like. I mean, and we see that in medical records where obviously abuse, and it's pure abuse and neglect when you got those types of bed sores and things. But that is like that happens in nursing homes, hospice, hospitals, where you've got that down but if you have those, you need to include them everywhere. I don't care if you're reporting fraud for on a billing statement, you include those photos too. Make them
They're
look at it.
impactful. They're very, very impactful, and it gets people's attention where a simple complaint, it's like a train wreck. You can't look away. And the
Yeah,
horror of it makes the impact much greater.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
What?
we all tell our stories, and when you have things that you can show people, it hits home for them. They finally, the realization finally hits how extreme it was. It wasn't just my perspective. It's really that bad.
Right. What about recordings? Some people have recordings. I have heard some of the most horrendous recordings, like Charlene Del Vecchio, her mom begging for water. Um, I have heard Jessica Oakes, her son, when she was with her son, she was able to videotape them coming after her, just like being rude, but also mocking other patients and those types of things. I've heard lots of video or audio and video. Um, include those.
Well, yes, and video and audio recordings are actually two different animals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a video recording in public, you have no expectation of privacy. So there's no restrictions necessarily on being able to submit
Mm-hmm.
videotape. Audio recordings are a little different. There are laws in different states
Yeah, recording them.
as to whether or not you can record without everyone being aware of that recording. I know Oklahoma is a one-party state, but Florida is a two-party state.
Yeah,
Oklahoma, you can record something and audio, and as long as at least one person knows that it's being recorded, you're fine.
which is you.
Which is
Yeah,
you,
which
right?
is you.
No one else needs to know. This is why I have 5 hours of recorded conversation with the captain of the police department. He
Right.
didn't know it was being recorded, but I did.
Yeah.
And every single agency, every time I got on a phone call and started talking to these agencies, I recorded the phone calls. There's all kinds of apps you can add to your phone, and you can tell them it's being recorded or ask them, do you mind if I record this phone call? Or just tell them. I mean, but you don't need to ask for their permission. But if your state requires you to notify people that they're being recorded, tell them I'm
Yeah.
recording this phone call.
Right.
But record every opportunity you can to make sure that one, you don't get caught in a situation where they say you did something or said something that you didn't do or say, and you can hold them accountable for things that they do say.
That's
So
right. If
those
you
are
live,
very important.
check your state. Texas is a one party state too, so I always say, wear your recorder like you wear your underwear and record everything, but also be mindful of what you say,
Mhm.
because if you use it, here's what you can't do. Number one party recording state, you have to be one person who knows it's being recorded has to be in that room or on that call. You
Yes.
can't leave a recorder in a room and walk away and nobody in that room knows.
That's
That's
surveillance.
yeah, that's surveillance. But also you can't chop it up. Like you can't, it's going to be all of the recording or nothing when it comes down to delivering it. So make sure that you don't say anything threatening or, that discredits you. So,
And
um,
for law enforcement purposes, you cannot alter or adulterate any kind of
right,
recording
right.
because they immediately know that that's been edited. They can do, electronic signature stuff. I don't know all of that, but they can
So,
tell very quickly that that has been edited or that it has been modified, and then it is no longer valid.
so be mindful of all of that. So CMS, so we're going to put some of these letters we're going to put some of this information out there on our downloadables as well, right? So this is kind of an example of what a CMS thing. Can you see that?
The conditions of participation
Yeah.
violations, yes. This is related to patients' rights. This is where anything in that section, and it's online. You can, and it's not long drawn out and in depth. It's actually a very easy read. If you go look up that Title 42 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 482.13 is the full patient rights. If anything on that list has been violated, or that you believe or you have evidence has been violated, that would qualify to send a letter under this format. You can write your own. I just tried to make it easy. And there are key words that need to be added. And they've been done in bold. Serious patient safety concerns and potential systemic violations. Those are key words that will get attention from whoever is reading or pulling up this letter. There are certain things that trigger a response. And that key phrase, and you'll see it over and over again, use it everywhere you can. Serious patient safety concerns. And it changes a little bit depending on who you're reporting to. But those are the key phrases that trigger a response or a trigger someone. So if it's read electronically, that will pull it out of the bulk data dump and send it to and escalate it or elevate it to a different level or send it to someone for individual review.
Yeah, it's also very helpful if they decide to not act on it, that you've put in those words that they should be acting on.
Exactly.
Because that will come back to bite them if they don't even investigate and it says serious patient safety concerns or violations.
And honestly, the key to all of this isn't to be realistic. And I figure we're probably going to get there later on. But to be realistic, it's probably not going, none of what we talk about tonight is going to trigger a great big broad investigation.
Unless enough people do. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. If enough people report the same thing to CMS,
yes,
they might say, "Oh, there's a pattern of brewing," right? Or
right.
The HHS Office for Civil Rights, which is this one. This is we'll put this one out there too. So this one is, basically, this is basically the patient was subjected to a medical procedure without consent under circumstances involving coercion, inability to consent, or discrimination. I would venture to say everybody's medical records is right there.
Yep.
And the key words, I like that you put these key words in there too. So the complaint involves serious interference with patient autonomy and dignity, are the key phrases there. Patient was pressured.
Well, because it goes back to that one line where it talks about you have the right to be treated safely and with respect. So you are directly addressing the violation with that key phrase.
Yeah, and without consent. And it's interesting too on this one. So because there have been people who've come forward to tell their story where language barriers did exist. In fact, we helped somebody here in Texas while I was still getting off of oxygen, whose father had a language barrier and still was isolated. And then of course disability affecting, so disability affected ability to consent is interesting too, because if they've drugged the hell out of your loved one to where they don't know what's going on, how, like, they're incapacitated in that moment. And you even seen where people were on vents and they tried to claim there was some level of consent, which couldn't be when you're on a vent. So
well, and like Grace Shara.
Yeah.
Even though she was considered an adult, she wasn't capable of making,
Mm-hmm.
consensual
Mm-hmm.
decisions based for regarding her treatment. She just didn't have that ability. Um, so there are multiple scenarios where that would come into play. Um, or again, if you look at the next one, treatment was imposed. The treatment had already been taken, and had already been taken effect. So you're now not capable of giving consent to it because they've already done it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
So they can't come back after the fact and say, "Is it okay that we did this?" That doesn't constitute consent.
So, and like, I think about my own case too for this one. So, when I report this week, which I'm going to do, I am going to report the fact that, and luckily, Dr. Ganquat, you're going to hear his name all week, just because I want to say it. Let's say their name too. So, Dr. Ganquat in Houston, the Ganquat, what he actually documented this, which is going to make it a lot easier. But he, in order for me to get my priest in, told me I had to take remdesivir, and
Mhm.
that is a coercive action for me to get my
That's
last
coercion
right.
and extortion to
Yeah,
an extent.
and so I will be reporting him for that on to the HHS Office for Civil Rights and Fraud. Let's keep it going. I'm making notes here myself. All right, so we got OIG fraud. Okay, the OIG. I don't know if people realize how much they play into this. HHS's Office of Inspector General. They not only they also hold the contracts between the government and the hospitals and the insurance companies, which would be wonderful to be audited. So, whatever violations you can possibly report here, we should hopefully we can get 10,000 people so that it triggers that too.
Well, and with Kennedy now being in
Mhm.
that position over those agencies, I think there's a greater opportunity to have some of these things addressed. And if you
Mhm.
look under allegation, here's the kicker, here's the key. The procedure or a procedure was performed without consent and subsequently billed to Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance. So if they did not get your consent,
That's
like
right.
remdesivir, and then they billed for that medication,
Mhm.
that's fraud. That's billing misconduct. And I am sure there's probably 10,000 people out there who fall into that category as well. They
That
didn't know what they were being given. We know
yeah,
personal stories where somebody's, goes in for treatment. You say, "What are you giving me?" They've already started the IV
yeah,
without telling them what's in it. It says, "What is this?"
right.
Well, it's remdesivir. Well, that's you. When did the consent come into play?
Right. And so it could be medications, and it also could be things like ventilation,
Mm-hmm.
and that type of thing. So billing for unauthorized services, possible false documentation and consent. Consent, we see that a
Every
lot.
single case,
Yeah,
every
that's
single
about right.
story falls under possible false documentation of consent because
And
no
here's
consent forms were signed.
here's the big kicker for me, which when I saw this slide, financial gain tied to non-consensual treatment.
Yep.
So the fact that that they operated under incentive based, not evidence based, incentivized based medicine. They got incentives for all of those things that they coerced you to do. That's financial gain.
Mm-hmm.
So false claims, fraudulent billing practices, and systemic misconduct. That's pretty good. That's a good one. That's a good one. We'll get these form letters out. out to you guys as well, because I think everybody will want to
Well,
report that.
and we know that they had the DRG codes, which are the additional payment
That's
or
right.
added value
That's right.
treatment codes.
And if you haven't, on our website under resources, I think it's under resources, downloadables, partners and friends downloadables. We do have AJ DePriest's Follow the Money series on there, the Blood Money series.
And at the bottom, you have the improper use of federal funds.
Oh yeah, let me see. Oh yeah, the code word or the keyword. Yeah, this
Mm-hmm.
matter. Yeah, make sure you use that. Okay, and then this one is FBI, DOJ, criminal conduct and abuse. Um, and you've actually reported on a lot of these. You've reported for yourself on
Yes.
these, so you know what you're talking about. So talk about this one.
So the DOJ, when you go to the DOJ where they're talking about reporting for Crime Victims Week, what they have there is links to the different agencies. You're not going to report directly to the DOJ. You're reporting to the FBI, and the FBI can um, escalate it or forward it to the Department of Justice under certain circumstances. So what you're doing here is when you report it to the FBI, and I would highly recommend hand deliver this to your regional FBI field office,
If possible.
if possible. Generally speaking, there's going to be a field FBI field office within an hour of everyone, but it may be inconvenient to get to. And now, since so much had happened with the FBI a few years ago, most of the offices are locked. You have to make an appointment to speak with
Yeah,
an agent. But my strong suggestion is to hand deliver this, and you can make your report while you're there. Not only are you delivering this, you can get a case number, you can file your report, and what they do with it at that point, may or may not go anywhere, but you have your paper trail. This is all about making sure you have done your due diligence, that there is no plausible deniability, that people can never say, I didn't know, nobody ever told us. And keep every scrap of paper, note that they have given you, documentation, case file, report number, name, business card, everything. Keep it all, even if it's just in a little file somewhere in your filing cabinet.
yeah,
Because at some point, this will start to come out.
that's right. I also like to take a little picture of the card, like when I go to the Capitol or when I go to report something. I take a little picture of their card too, just so I have the picture. And I write right away. I'll write like a couple key things on the back of their card, just so I don't forget it.
And you can
Helps.
ask them if you have permission to record the interaction. Because it's law enforcement, because they are in the process of doing their job, it is your First Amendment right to record the interaction.
Yeah.
And that may hold them a little more accountable to do what they're supposed to do appropriately. But
Mhm.
this is a big one. This one, anytime there is unauthorized physical contact. So again, no consent, but not just no consent. It's they did something above and beyond and outside the scope of treatment. If you're
Right.
walking out the door and they grab you to stop you, that is unauthorized physical contact. If you and honestly, I would love to see people who were coerced into taking the vaccine to keep their job start
Yeah,
filing some of these complaints,
that's right. That would be good.
because that's coercion.
Also, there was a group of doctors that came out and blew the whistle from, it was from HCA hospitals. I'd have to find the article, but they said that they were told to vent people because they were told it was safer for the staff. It wasn't that that the people they vented needed venting. And then the other thing that we also saw was the ventilation of patients as a form of restraint. Restraints are very tricky because we'll get into that in a little bit here with Mick. The requirements around restraints. Yeah, I'm going to call on your nursing, but we'll get into that. Well, maybe I'll ask you now if you're. I'm no mean to, don't mean to surprise you, but um
Mick's always ready.
right, always ready. So like there's laws around what you have to do before you vent. What you have to do once, you have to have a plan for trying to not vent, restrain.
Hmm.
Physical restraints of a patient and even chemical restraints. There's certain things that you need to do, and then you have to have a plan, right? Don't you? And check them and stuff. Can you talk about that? You're on mute, but go ahead.
So, yeah. So here's the thing. You have restraints that may be physical restraints, whether you have, and even guardrails up on the beds, have been indicated. If you are putting them up because you're trying to keep a patient in the bed, that is considered a restraint. You don't have to actually put something on them. It is the ability of preventing them from either getting out of the bed, it's limiting their movement, it's restricting them in any way, shape, or form. Even when you put people who are in a chair, a geriatric chair, and you put a little bedside table in front of them, it restricts their movement. That is a restraint. What we saw with COVID was that they were putting people not just in physical restraints, but they were using massive chemical restraints. So they would be giving people morphine or Ativan, or if you gave them a multitude of those drugs, and if you gave it in a frequency where that patient was lethargic for portions of time where you either could arouse them, but maybe they would just fall back to sleep real easily, that's a restraint. So in that case, in that situation, what should be done is, first of all, you need an order. You can't just say, I'm going to put this person in wrist restraints, or I'm going to give them a extra morphine, I'm going to give them Ativan, I'm going to do all of that. You have to have orders. And then if you're going to utilize that in a restraint, then you have to check that person. The restraints have to be checked every 2 hours. You have to check for pulses. You have to ensure that there's good skin integrity. You're not, wrenching them down to the bed. So, you're cutting off circulation. And then you're supposed to, every time that you record, you're supposed to go in and then also check the patient for pain, check the patient for hydration. Are they wet? Do they need to be moved? Those are all things so that you can ensure not just that you're taking care of that one area of restraint, but that you're taking care of the whole person, because that's what the person is. They're an entire person. They're not just one cell, not just one area. And so, and then you have to have those orders re-upped every day. You have to have a
Mhm.
new order every 24 hours. It has to be
Reevaluate.
signed. It has to be, I'm sorry.
Reevaluate the patient as well to determine if the restraints are still necessary.
Yeah.
Every 24 hours, and in cases when it's pediatric, it's even less so. You have to do even more checking if it's a child. So yeah, there are specific things that you have to do with restraints. The problem that I see, just in what I've seen from people who have given me their testimonies, there are some people who have given me their medical records. What you see is a long line line of narcotics and other medications, sedative medications that are used, and you don't see any kind of restraint forms used, but that is a chemical restraint.
Now, Mick, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it also necessary? Isn't there a mandatory reporting if a patient is confined to physical restraints at the time of death?
Well, anytime that you have if they're restrained at the time of death, that may be, you may know more about that than I do. But anytime we had a reporting of death in the hospital, I mean, all of it had to be reported, whether they were in restraints or not. But even,
I
but I worked in the ICU, so many times we had people when they passed away, they were in restraints, and I didn't have to do a specific other report. That may be something new, though, by Joint Commission.
Well, the way I understand it is if a patient is confined by physical restraint at the time of death, it's supposed to trigger a, they're supposed to report that the patient was actually in the physical restraints, and it's supposed to trigger a kind of not necessarily an investigation, but a review that it was appropriate and that there wasn't anything that could have been prevented.
Is that a law? Is that where?
I believe it's under the Code of Federal Regulations. It's not in the patient rights section. It's in a separate section of the conditions of participation through CMS. But I will get the information if anyone is interested. Just reach out to Gail or Mick, and I will make sure I get that information, because that was one of the things that I saw repeatedly, that patients were dying while they were in physical restraints, and there was no review that had taken place. And it's a requirement under the conditions of participation. So,
well, the federal regulations prohibit the use of restraints, except in emergency situations. I'm reviewing over it right now. I know there are federal regulations for the use of restraints for safety, for monitoring. They include physical restraints, they include chemical restraints. I'm looking specifically, but I'll keep digging. I was never in the hospital. I mean, I worked for 30 years. That was never something that we had to, I mean, we had to report everything. We had to report whether they were intubated. We had to report whether they had catheterization, Foley catheters, IV, central lines. We had to report everything. So we always reported when they were in restraints. And then we would always report too, in the case of death, whether they were expected or unexpected. But there was never anything specific, but I will keep digging as well.
okay, so I just found it.
Okay,
hospitals
great.
must report to CMS any patient death occurring while in restraints or seclusion within 24 hours of removal, or within 1 week if the restraint contributed to the death. Reports are due by the close of the business, the next business day.
So is that because it was caused by the restraint? We'll take this conversation off later, because that's getting a little too into the weeds. Yeah,
no, it just says reportable deaths while in restraint or seclusion, or within 24 hours of removal.
Wow.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
So that's a good one to be. A lot of people can report based on improper, illegal restraints. I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people, I've seen a lot of cases where the restraints weren't checked for 11 hours or 20 hours. Or I mean, yeah. If they didn't document it, it didn't happen. Right. So let's get into this, because Mick, okay, let me go to this next slide here. This is the state level reporting is critical. Go, Leslie.
So your state medical board first, and these are not necessarily in the order of how you should do it, but first and foremost, you should call your local law enforcement if it's something that is occurring at that moment.
Right.
Again, Gail, I know you can speak to this. The police are not necessarily always on your side,
Right.
and they're not necessarily always your friend, but
Right.
you have documentation that has been reported.
Yes.
There is evidence that someone was notified of it.
That's right.
And
That's
it's
right.
dereliction of duty. You can pursue all of those things later. Also, the state medical board, again, in Oklahoma, they're bound by the Allopathic Act, so it's very limited as to what they will address, whether that's intentional or whether that's just a convenient excuse for some of this stuff. You definitely want to make a complaint, and almost every state medical board has a website where you can file that complaint directly on their website. The Department of Health is someone you want to notify, and the reason why you want to notify the Department of Health is because CMS, and we've talked about those Code of Federal Regulations, all of those codes are audited and handled by the State Department of Health. So CMS contracts or outsources their surveys and their investigations to the State Department of Health. Initially, when you call them and you tell them that this has occurred and you're filing your complaint, they're going to say, we don't do that. But then when you tell them, I understand that is not under the Department of Health's purview, but as the agency that handles the audits and surveys for CMS, this is your responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's like everything else. Everybody wants to tell you it's not their job. They don't have the authority, and they try to kick the can down the road. But as long as you have specific language that you can use, and you can tell them, I understand that under the state guidelines, this is not your job. But as the health department, you perform these audits and surveys for CMS, and this is a CMS violation. So you can notify them, or you can do it through CMS, but CMS, when you call them, they're just going to kick you back to the state health department anyway. So
right, but do it anyways, right?
Absolutely. Again, it's documenting that paper trail. It's keeping track and making sure you have done your due diligence, and you have that you've reached out to every agency you possibly can, and either been denied or rejected, or it's all going to make a difference in the end. And as you move up and escalate, as we'll talk about, attorney generals and those kind of things, as you escalate through the different levels of government and those kind of things, you will expose the lack of accountability and the failures in the system that you have experienced along the way. And then you can start going back and fixing these problems.
That's right. And remember, your sheriff has a job. It's called protecting your constitutional rights and all of that. So
just hope he has jurisdiction.
All right. I'm going to pull up a question, and I don't know if we don't know the answer, we'll get back to Anne Marie. But she's asking, and y'all put your questions in if you have questions. Okay. We may know the answer. If we don't know the answer, we'll find somebody who has an answer, and we'll get back to you, and we'll put an FAQ together for questions that we don't know. So she's asking, with a combative patient who wants to go home, would it be considered restrictive when the hospital has someone sitting in the room? It was told to us for safety. So that would be like a sitter. So
right.
Have a sitter.
In Florida, yes. Under Florida law, it would depend on what state you're in. Right. Under Florida law, that is considered false imprisonment. You do not actually have to physically restrain the person. You just have to give them the impression that they are not welcome to leave.
Oh, all right. Wow. So it would depend on the state. That's interesting. Right. That's interesting. So, like in my case, the police in the hallway would have been making me feel like I was not welcome to leave.
Well, yeah, if that's how your state language is written, then yes.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, because we know there's a survivor in our small survivor group who there was an armed guard walking the halls, slapping his rifle, scaring patients, and he never felt like he could leave either. Yeah, no, that's good to know. So check your state. Check your state. Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah,
You've done
that's
your
what we're here
homework.
for tonight.
Yeah. All right. So common defenses and responses.
This is what you're going to get from different agencies, specifically the hospital generally, or law enforcement. When you question why a doctor or hospital did something, they can always state it was an emergency, because that's the kind of their scapegoat. That's their scapegoat excuse. Everything has to be done, emergently. And if that's the case, if that's the excuse or defense that they try to use, demand that they show you the documentation. Demand that they show you that that patient was in acute distress and that it was necessary, or why it was necessary. It is their job to make sure that you are an integral part of that, your patient care, whether it's you or whether it's your loved one that you have some authority to have information on. It is your right and it is their requirement to make sure that you are aware and you have the ability to be involved in a what's the word I'm looking for, a participant in your patient care and care plan. Patient consented.
Mm-hmm.
We hear that a whole lot. Doctors called and said, oh, well, they gave us consent. Require specific consent and ask to see the documentation. I want to see that consent form. When the doctor called me and told me that my husband had given consent to intubation, I said, then why are you calling asking for my consent? There will be a signed consent form on his medical record.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need my consent. So, which there wasn't, and he didn't, but they're going to try to use that and it's your word against theirs. Now, under all of these CFRs that we've provided and all of these resources that we've given you, you will read repeatedly that consent is to be documented, not just patient states, but it has to be documented, the conversation specifically, and a signed consent form.
Mm-hmm.
That's the regulation. That's the rule. And generally they can't provide that. And that's where, you move forward. But standard practice, we hear a lot of standard of care and what the doctor, what a doctor of or group of a doctor's peers would have done in the same circumstances. Doesn't matter if there is a law that is in place. Their standard practice does not override the law. So those are your rebuttals to their defenses and how you should respond. If they say, well, it's standard practice, tell them, well, even if it's standard practice, the law says this. And you can move forward there.
Okay, we've got another question from Stephanie. Do these agencies go by statute of limitations?
Some
of them do, yeah.
Some of them do.
JCO, I know.
When you're reporting to things like CMS or JCO or the Joint Commission, they are going to tell you if it's been more than, I believe JCO is 1 year.
It's 2 years in Texas, so it's going to depend. Yeah, it's 2 years in Texas. However, you should report anyways.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do know somebody who got a response or got action out of JACO, even though they filed 3 years in. So, I mean, it could happen, but
It could, and especially depending on one of, and I hate to put it this way, but one of the things that is actually in our favor is that there are medical records, and that those medical records don't change. And if they do change, there's evidence that they have changed.
yeah, exactly. And imagine if you could get like, I just happen to know Stephanie's mom's story is on our website, and I did the interview, so I just happen to know she's in Florida, right? So um, let's say, you know, you could get 400 people to report that same thing to JACO in Florida. They're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to go, wow, we just got 400. If you do it if you can get a movement, that's why Crime Victim Rights Week is so important. Imagine if you could get the numbers behind you reporting the same thing to the same agencies, to the same federal agency, then somebody there is processing those and looking at them and going, we something smells rotten in pick a city in a state, right? Like, so
Well, and it sends a safety signal, you
yeah,
know, whether they disclose it publicly or not, there is going to be a safety signal that is established. It's going to trigger a algorithm somewhere saying this is something we need to look at. Whether they do or not, the system isn't going to be discriminatory against specifically COVID unless somebody has told it to.
right. And
Uh,
one of the most important reasons to report and to report now, right? To report this week during Crime Rights Week is the numbers, but it's also because most cases are never investigated for these things, especially as horrific as we know. Millions of people have been killed in these facilities, hospitals, hospice, nursing homes. When you all band together, the shots, when you all band together and report, and you're going to hear more about how to report specifically on the shots on Friday. But when you do that, they can dismiss one case, not even give it any thought, but thousands, imagine thousands. That's a pattern.
yeah.
So that's why our goal is 10,000 reports in 1 week, whether those are fraud, it, you know, battery, whatever it is. And so I'm going to say it over and over again. A few cases can be ignored, thousands can't. That's why you should also add your loved one to our memorial wall. That is very impactful. Even our web guy that has to put all those up was like, wow, so
Well, and
far.
keep in mind, these agencies don't have people reading every single complaint.
That's
What's
right.
happening is they're going into a system and they're being filtered by AI. And that's one of
Mhm.
the reasons why those key phrases are so important.
That's right.
Because if that key phrase keeps happening over and over and over again, AI is going to pull those aside and say, this is an issue. It's going to send a
Mhm.
signal to the next level saying, we have a problem here.
Yeah, Matt said so. If enough of these crimes are reported, it will trigger a function within these agencies that they will have to notice, and therefore they will not have plausible deniability. Correct? That is correct.
That is my understanding, because you can't imagine that these agencies they're paying someone to sit there anymore and
Yep,
read these
exactly.
complaints.
Thank you, Matt. Your check's in the mail for making that comment. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't pay him to say it. So this is the last slide that I have that will actually show up, because the
Yeah.
14th one doesn't show. But
No, it was just for my information.
okay, good, because wow, like I was like, that's a lot. Okay. All right.
That
So,
last, yeah, the key strategies are to make sure you tell everyone possible.
okay.
Do it now, and do it everywhere. And keep track of every piece of paper that they send you. I have an entire 3-inch, 3-ring binder of communications with just written communications with different agencies, letters that I've received that they've responded to complaints and we'll do this. No, we won't do that. And it's funny because when you make the complaint, the person you're talking to, the intake person or coordinator, is going to be like, oh my gosh, that's horrific. How did this happen?
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden, they call you back and, oh, sorry, we didn't find any violation.
that's right. And so, yeah, very important. Um, and Mick, just going to pick on you for a minute. So, what scares the hospitals the most, other than this form, I do not consent form.com, which I just want to say recently, two different people that I know use these for this form, Laura's Bartlett's form, and used it as directed, had it ready, had it couriered where it needed to go. And both of those people had had a loved one killed in the hospitals in 2021. And the experience that they had was dramatically different. Dramatically different. They had the royal carpet treatment. They respected their wishes, all of that. And so, here's the thing: I've heard people go, "Well, won't I piss the doctor off if I blah blah blah? If I have this form?" Think about the good doctors in the hospitals that said that their hands were tied and they couldn't do what you were asking them to do because of administration. This would have protected doctors like Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, who loves this form too. It would have protected those doctors. All they would have had to say, I can't give them remdesivir. Here's the form. Like, look, I got this courier to we get all of us got this form, and so they would have been protected to do the things that you needed them to do. So make sure that you do go there. It is very easy, so easy. Look at Dr. Joseph Mercola. He loves the form. Dr. Aranda, who doesn't respect Dr. Aranda? She only gives you good stuff. So it's very easy to download. Download the instructions. Don't skip this, Laura. It's very clear. It's very black and white, right? Print it. You can connect with Laura. So other than this form, tell me, what do they fear? What triggers audits? What triggers what? Because everybody's pants are on fire in a hospital or in a clinic or in a nursing home when CMS or JACO or anybody's
Right.
coming.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the first thing is, word on the street. If you've got a health department or a CMS audit, you got somebody who's complaining, that's the first thing. You get that announcement overhead. You get it in every meeting. It's sent out in an email. It's, you're getting it through your, phone. Your notifications are blowing up. You've got meetings every 5 minutes. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to have you pull all your charts, all your
Mhm.
policies. Everything is going to be lined out to make sure, are you following, are you documented appropriately? But the health department and CMS audits, those are usually triggered when they start to see that there are multiple complaints about the same issue. If they start getting calls from people that are saying over and over and over the same exact patterns, that will trigger an audit. any kind of patient rights violations. And you mentioned multiple of the patient rights violation, the lack of the informed consent, the DNRs, the informed consent that wasn't signed, the DNRs that were, without any authorization, anything that you can see that automatically comes up as a patient rights violation, you can make those complaints. If they start to see that pattern, that will trigger a health department or a CMS audit. Patterns are extremely important to CMS because, again, they do pay out on quality assurances. When they go through and they audit, if you didn't have a certain amount of people who were infection free, if you didn't have a certain amount of people who did not obtain, ventilator associated pneumonias, if you don't meet those standards, you don't get those monies. So if they start to see patterns, they'll audit. And then, of course, any kind of serious harm or death. If you have a sentinel event is anything that occurs in the hospital because of a harm that was done that was outside of the standard of care. If a harm befalls a patient and they die or they're seriously injured, that will automatically trigger a CMS or a health department audit. OSHA is different. OSHA is going to be triggered if they have unsafe conditions for your staff. Now, I have been in an OSHA audit. They are not fun, but if you have somebody call in, your nursing staff or your physician staff, and they call in about unsafe conditions, there will be an OSHA audit. Any kind of exposed risk, especially biohazard risks, that will stimulate an audit. If you have an internal whistleblower complaint, they do take whistleblowers, they take them extremely seriously. So OSHA is usually going to be a staff driven. They do have patients who can call in and complain they had blood left out or there was a spill of blood or whatever. You can have patient complaints, but those are usually, the OSHA is usually triggered by a staff complaint. Joint Commission, they are going to accreditate all your hospitals. They are triggered by, and again, they will take any kind of anonymous complaint. I've been in Joint Commission services or audits where they came in and a whole group of nurses actually went to the Joint Commission's hotel and had a meeting with them, and started telling them, here's all the issues that have been going on. And they do take online submissions as well. And they are very serious about it. When I was in the hospital and there was a Joint Commission review, and the nursing staff, multiple of them, went to the hotel and spoke to the Joint Commission auditors. By the next day, the whole entire administration, you could just hear them squeaking because they had them pulled in and they were just going through everything. It was like a 2 weeks of hell. It extended the Joint Commission and then they came back. Surprise visits a couple months in a row. So they take it very seriously. Safety concerns, repeated complaints. They do not want to hear repeated complaints, especially if it is by the staff. Sentinel events, again, any kind of harm or death, that will stimulate a Joint Commission, and they will be unannounced. They love to do unannounced. And I would prefer for an unannounced, because if you got an announced audit, what are you going to do? You're going to go through everything and make sure it's all in line. If it's unannounced, you're caught, right?
Yeah.
So big triggers are going to be across all agencies, and they always are going to look for, and Leslie's right, they look at those algorithms. They look for patterns, they look for multiple reports, and they look for consistency in the reporting. If you have somebody, 3 different people, and they're giving the same story, that will generate. If you have one complaint, I think they just consider that a story. If you have multiple complaints, that's a systemic failure.
That's
And
right.
so that's going to force an audit right there.
And I think it's important for people to know as well, like you're going to hear that's the theme, volume of complaints equals pattern, but you can also report to more than one agency, and you should report to more than one agency. You should report federally, you should report state, you should report to the agencies, to law enforcement, because after all, what was done was a crime. That's why we're saying
Sure.
that we need to be acknowledged as medical crime victims. And Teresa, if you can put in the chats out there the link to the proclamation that we read yesterday. The proclamation, I am going to, so many people have signed it, and I am like thrilled that so many people signed it. It's great. Let me share. Um,
Gail, if I could say one more thing,
sure.
be a Karen. Be an absolute Karen. If you do not get what you need from the initial level, escalate it to their supervisor. Go to the manager. Keep going to the manager. Go to the manager's manager. Go to the manager's manager's manager. As high as they will let you climb.
That's
If
right.
you get a rejection one place, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. They deserve it. To be honest, like they deserve it. Don't let them get away with it. Don't just let them get away with it. They'll just keep getting away with it. So this is the proclamation that was read yesterday. This will also help us get justice. Go and sign it. If you haven't signed it, share it. Get people to sign it. It is basically, we are asking to be formally recognized as medical crime victims. That's it, and that would be admitting that a crime has occurred, because we do believe that the first step towards justice begins with recognition. It doesn't begin in a courtroom. So make sure that you go out and you sign this either as somebody who supports this mission or somebody who is a medical crime victim. And it's very simple. You just read it, sign it, email address, boom. And that's all you need. And so that's super important. We're going to get the recognition that we deserve. We're going to put the form letters out there on our social media. We're going to get them on our downloadables under our resources on our website, the I do not consent form.com. We do have the link in our resources, but it's very simple to remember. I do not consent form.com. Laura Bartlett, it's black and white. She's explained many places where to use it. We've seen it work. I know it feels like it wouldn't work, but it's the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. So please use it, and use it correctly, the way it's easy to use, but use it the way she describes it. She's always willing to answer questions. I've never known anyone to reach out to Laura and not get the help that they needed to save their loved one or to save them. She's been that is her main, I can tell you that has been her main goal in everything that she does, is to save lives. So, and I've known her since they tried. Our stories are very much intertwined because her brother, Dr. Bartlett, helped save me. But, and she, like, I know that I've known her for a long time. That's all she does is save lives. That's like,
and I've known the guy that saved you almost my entire life.
Since he was in diapers, or since you were in diapers? Yeah.
We go way back. Since I was put in a banana box straight from the hospital. That was my first baby bed, for real. Little fun fact.
Right. Yeah. He's got to be older than you, right? Because he looks older. He's older,
yeah,
right?
See, if I hadn't been, if my bed, my first crib hadn't been a Jaquita banana box, I probably would have been a doctor. So this is what
That's
you
right.
get. You get this.
That's why you became a comedian. Because that's what
That's
else are
how
you
it
going to
works.
do?
Be
Yeah,
put in a produce box, and this is what happens.
that's right. That's right. I'm with you on that. Good friends. Um, so we're going to put this out there, this little one pager, possible federal crimes. I think Teresa may have already put that out on our social media. What to prepare and where to report it. Got the little QR codes. Thank you, Teresa, for doing that. And then this is our schedule. Our schedule is out there. We want to make sure that you go into Crime Victim Week and beyond smarter, more educated, being able to talk about these issues. Because like Dr. David Martin said once, we don't have a long time to get our PhDs in this. And the life you save could be your own. It could be somebody that you love. It could be your kids. It could be your parents. It is very important to know this stuff. I personally learned something amazing from Marcia Joyner from her book Betrayed by Hospice: Stories from the Deathbed, um, that helped us save a life. So today you learned about reporting medical crimes, your rights, your voice, your actions. Um, Tomorrow, Dr. Aranda and Laura Bartlett are joining us to talk about beyond the ER door. So, was it murder? So, we're going to talk about evidence based versus incentive based medicine, violations of standard of care. Dr. Margaret's going to give us a forensic view of all of that. We're going to deep dive into fraud. What is medical fraud? What's not medical fraud? And how you handle medical fraud. We're going to talk about the protocols, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the criminal. Beyond the ER doors, what happened. Then Laura's going to give us some deep dive into be prepared, not scared. That's what she's always said for years. And Mick and Laura will have a discussion about how to advocate. Mick is an expert in that area as well as Laura. And we'll talk about, again, how justice begins with recognition. So it's action. This week is meant to be action packed and to give you the tools. It's one thing for us to just say, do this, do that. But we feel like we need to give people the tools and the knowledge to do it. And so all week we've got stuff planned. Hospice on Wednesday, surviving brain death and organ harvesting. We're going to have on Thursday Dr. Klessig, and we're going to have a brain death survivor. Imagine that. That's the thing nightmares are made of, guys, but I can't wait to hear that. And then the vaccines we're going to cover, vaccine murder with Road Warriors, Julie Threet and Ron Owens. And they're going to have a bunch of special guests. They're surprising me too. So it's going to be people in the fight with them, doctors and things like that. And then Saturday we'll have Survivor Saturday and Second Chances, and then we're going to wrap it up Sunday with some closing ceremonies and another reading of the names, and see if it'll be more names than we read this Sunday. So, and that will be rounding out our week. And so, I want to leave you with a want to leave you guys. I want, first of all, do you guys have any, Mick or Leslie or Laura, do you have any parting thoughts for all of these folks that we're watching?
No, I
It's literally black and white. Laura, you're such a comedian. I love it. That we need more of that. We need more of that.
No, I just want to thank you guys for doing this, because this is important. This is vital to making sure that people are safe and protected. There's a lot more to come. There's a lot more work to do, but it is, like you said, it's getting the recognition as a group of victims is so important. And it's the
Yeah.
very first step.
Yeah.
I'm
And
gonna
I
go
just want
ahead.
to say that when we say let's report 10,000 cases, this is why we're not chasing prosecutions. We're creating the way that they can't deny patterns. We're building pressure, and we're trying to get visibility, because the system is not just moved on stories. I just want to say this, it moves on data. It really does. And when people say that, we've done these things and we've tried these things and nothing happened, I understand that, because we've been pushing too. But nothing happening doesn't mean that there isn't something that is building. Every report adds to that record. It strengthens the pattern, it increases the pressure, and at some point, that pressure is going to force action. And so I just wanted to say that, because Crimes Victim Rights Week, this is what the action looks like, is presenting that information, that education, and that advocacy. That's what we need. It's
That's
not
right.
just awareness, it's participation.
That's right. And this is just this is literally a springboard for us. And, our board at betrayalprojectusa.org, our board members, you can go see, they all have skin in the game. Like, they've all have, like, it's incredible. They've all lost somebody or are a survivor. Um, and this is a very important mission. We're not giving up. And so you can always count on us to brainstorm strategy around getting justice. And I say this all the time because I have to give a shout out to Jody Carroll, who lost her mother, her mother was killed in Texas, and we're friends. And this whole Crime Victim Week strategy came about because she texted me an idea. Hey, did you know there was a Crime Victim Week? So we always want to hear your ideas too. So email us, email@betrayalprojectusa.org. And when you do report your crime, or you report to anybody, we'll start a little file. We'd like to save everybody's stuff to prove that to prove how many people reported. Because if and when we don't get action, we have the proof, and we're going to keep pushing. Hey, this many people reported this. Go look at our deadly playbook, our hospital deadly playbook on our website. It's got the 25 tactics that hospitals used. Forget about the medications necessarily. Look at even the treatment, the things that would have been a crime and are a crime prior. Changing your DNR status without your consent, the isolation, all of those things that are on there, and report them and send us the proof. We'll have a little folder with your name, and we'll stick all your proof in there, and we'll keep it. We're willing to do the work. And then if you want to help us do the work, that's even better. Teresa's always saying there's a volunteer form on there. We would love to hear from you. She can make use of Teresa's the vice president of Betrayal Project and the chair of the board. And believe me, if you want to volunteer, she's got somewhere for you.
Oh yeah.
So,
we got a lot of work to do, but it's not just one area. I mean, some people think, I don't even know, like, I can't be a lawyer. They may say something like this, and trust me, there every avenue that, if you just tell me a little bit about the things you like or experience you have, we will find a way to even just a little bit, an hour a week, it really helps lighten the load. Right. So absolutely.
It does. Even sharing our stuff on social media.
Very nice. Teresa seems very nice, but she'll tell you where to go. We're tough crowd. We're a tough crowd. I couldn't help it. Sorry.
She's tough. But even sharing our stuff on social media, right? Sharing, the I do not consent form.com, which is Laura's, sharing the stuff that Leslie Batts is doing. She's always coming up with something to bug legislators with. And, her and Peggy Hockett work together really well, and Mick. They're storming Oklahoma, which is great. We're trying to catch up in Texas, but there's always something to do. Always something to do. We've got a creative team. Go on our website. You'll see all the committees we have, and you'll see more from our BP USA Advocacy Network, which is Dr. Aranda, Laura, Julie Threet, Leslie, all these different groups. If you have an organization that is similar and has a piece of this fight, and you want to connect with us and be part of that BP USA Advocacy Network, reach out to me and Teresa. Our email is on our profile on the members on our website, in the board, under the board members. You can always reach out to us. So because we'd love to talk to you. And I'm going to wrap it up with, I wanted to say one more thing. A lot of common fears we hear about reporting. People will say, but what if I'm wrong, Gail? What if nothing happens? What if they ignore it? Right? Well, the cost of doing nothing is more people die. That's the cost of doing nothing. And that's just putting it very plain. The cost of doing nothing is more people die, and it's going to be people we love. It's going to be people we don't know. It's going to be people we know. Yesterday we heard about the 13-year-old who died the same way, the same things. 13 years old, didn't have to happen. And so that's the cost. That's why we can't do nothing. We have to do something. But also, silence guarantees that you won't get justice, right? Silence guarantees nothing happens. Reporting in mass amounts creates possibility. And if you're like, yeah, I got this, I'm going to do this, but people who may struggle with it, help them. If you know people that want to tell their story on our podcast, but they're afraid to do it alone, come on with them. We see that all the time, where a widow or somebody who had a loved one killed will come on with another one just to offer support. Anything that can make that happen. Just be that ambassador for somebody who wants to get justice, who wants to tell their story. There's so many creative ways to do it. And then the final call to action, is start with something simple. Just add your loved one to the Medical Crime Victims Memorial Wall on betrayalprojectusa.org. Get connected with us. Even we've got support groups, everything. Whatever it is, if you need support, we're there. If you want to help, we'd love to have you. We can't do this alone. And so, we're just all cogs in the wheel, right? So, and then definitely join our, whatever during the week you can, but definitely join our Sunday vigil, our closing ceremonies, and our vigil that we're going to read even more names than we did on Sunday and report your crime. Our goal is 10,000 reports. We've also got our official Crime Victim Rights Week t-shirts on the shop. Heidi Bond will yell at me if I don't tell you that. And the people are asking where to get the frames, the Facebook, what do you call those? Profile frames, the profile framing thing.
Frames?
Yeah. Those are also on our website. And thank you. And remember, we're not asking you to prove your case. We're asking you to make sure that it can no longer be ignored, and that is to prove the pattern. So silence guarantees nothing happens. Reporting creates the possibility, and we do believe justice begins with recognition.